Wow. Hello, Crossing Church. You doing okay? Are you doing good? Wow. How many of you saw that last week? That happened last week, okay? That was Felix Baumgartner. And what he did was he broke 3 world records at once. The first world record that he broke was it was the highest jump ever in history, 24 miles. He was 24 miles in the air. It took a weather balloon to take a capsule up to 24 miles, and then he opened and jumped out. So he's jumped from the highest distance ever in history. Second thing that he did is he had the longest free fall in history. That was incredible. And the third thing that he did that he wanted to do was break the sound barrier with only his body. And he went Mach 1.24. So he broke the speed of sound just in a suit. Now, just to understand how dangerous this was, they said that with almost no air that high in the stratosphere, if he pushed off just slightly more with one foot than he did with the other foot, it would put him in a flat spin. And he could go up to 240 revolutions per minute before he died. Just a time, because there's no wind resistance and no way of being able to control your spin or your fall. If he would have torn his suit, his blood would have boiled and his lungs would have exploded. I mean, this guy was crazy, okay? But when we were talking about this sermon in this series called Man Up, and we were talking about an adventure to live, we started talking about a leap of faith. And if that isn't a leap of faith, I don't know what is. That was just nuts, watching that guy jump out of that capsule. Just crazy. You know, it was interesting what he had to say. And I want to welcome everyone that's joining from all of our campuses if you've recovered from all the spinning. But just incredible. And you know what he said is that sometimes you have to get up so high to see how small you are. And I really believe that sometimes we have to get out of what is normal and what is usual for us to truly be able to see God. And I think that's where adventure happens. Adventure happens when we not only see God, but we get to interact with God. Now, I'm sure when he stepped out of that capsule, he felt closer to God and probably thought he might be seeing God any moment, you know, but I want you to know that there's an adventure that you and I can be on where we can experience the power and the presence of God on a daily basis. Now, the story that I'm going to relate to you in the Bible is not necessarily a leap of faith, but it is certainly a step of faith. And it's one that many of us, and any of us that have spent much time in the Bible, probably have heard this story before. And I want to read it. It's in Matthew chapter 14. It's the only scripture we'll be using today. So Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 22, an incredible story about a step of faith. So right now, I'm not asking you to consider a leap. I'm just asking you to consider a step, okay? Here's the story. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water." And there is the step of faith. "Come," he said, and Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." What a story. What an incredible story. And you may think, well, that really doesn't apply to me because, first of all, I don't have a boat. And secondly, I haven't been walking around with Jesus lately, at least in the physical sense, like Simon Peter did. So I don't really think that I'm really going to get many opportunities to walk on water. You have an adventure to live. Whether you're a man or a woman, male or female, it doesn't matter. You have an adventure to live. And that's what I want to talk about, because really, in truth, we all do have a boat. And I want to explain that to you. What do you mean, Jerry? We all have a boat. Well, the boat for these apostles was a very usual thing. They spent a lot of time in that boat. They would go from one village to another via the Sea of Galilee. They'd go by boat. If they wanted to go clear to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, they'd go by boat. 4 of those guys were professional fishermen, commercial fishermen. And so they lived their life out of a boat. This was a very normal, usual thing. And the boat symbolizes your usual and normal life. So in that sense, we all have a boat, right? Because we all have the usual, normal life. And so what does your boat look like? What's that predictable boat look like? Well, what did it look like today? What's it going to look like next week? Most of you maybe work days. Some of you maybe work nights. I don't know. But you get up in the morning, right? You're sleeping on the same side of the bed that you always sleep on, right? There's the same things that are there on your bedside that were there that'll always be there, right? And then you go into the bathroom and you clean up and take whatever medications and fix your hair and use the same products on your body, right? And you do the same thing that you do. I bet most of you, whatever you do in the shower, you do in the same order. I bet you do. I bet you always wash your hair one particular part and wash your body in another particular part, right? You have an order. And I mean, it's like somebody pressing play. And it's just the program going as normal. And then you get cleaned up and put on the clothes and you go outside and start the car and you go to work and you have this certain mundane thing you do every day, and then that you probably have some sort of lunch plan in an afternoon and then an evening, and then at a certain time of day is the usual time of day that you go to bed. Maybe you watch some TV and you go to sleep, and then the next day you do the whole thing over again. That's your boat. Have you got a boat? How many of you got a boat? Yeah, we all have that. We all have that usual and that predictable, the typical day, right? And, honestly, even though there's lots of things that you don't know that are going to come that day, it's not that adventurous. And some of you, I'm saying, you have an adventure to live, and you're going, really? No. There's not a whole lot of adventure in my day. It's just this mundane thing that I do day in and day out that I call life. And you know what? Your life is not really that different from the apostles. Now you're going, hold on. These guys were with Jesus, and they saw incredible, incredible things on a regular basis. Oh yeah, they did. But they were just spectators, right? I bet it was pretty much the same thing. If you followed Jesus, you'd get up in the morning. Jesus would have a plan for the day. He was the one leading, so you would do whatever he told you to do. And you'd go through that day, just like this day that we're reading about. Jesus had just done something absolutely miraculous. He had fed 5,000 men, which means about 15 or 20,000 people. And then he said, I want you to get in the boat and go to the other side of the lake. I'm staying here. And then after that, he dismissed the crowd. So the crowd knew that Jesus stayed and the apostles left, right? And then the crowd started to walk around the Sea of Galilee, that big lake in the land of Israel. So it was just another usual day. They didn't argue with Jesus. They got in the boat, started to go. We're really not that different. And some of you say, well, my life's an adventure, but usually it's an adventure in a negative way. It's usually like my life is a series of strung together challenges that are mostly negative. I'm just trying to get through. You know what it says in the story? It says that when they got in the boat and they started to go to the other side, the wind came up and it was against them. And what actually happened when you read the other gospel accounts is that they were out in that lake, but they couldn't get to where they wanted to go because the wind was blowing them and keep it so they could row all they wanted and put as much effort into trying to sail it or do whatever they did to propel it, but they could not move that boat. So it was just stuck. For all their effort trying to move it to where their destination was, they were just stuck. I bet some of you feel that way. Like I'm doing this thing I call life and I'm wanting to move forward, but I feel like the wind is against me and I'm just stuck. And as much effort and as much energy as I put into this, there are so many things working against me, I just don't see how I'm really making any headway at all. Again, not a lot of difference. And eventually, when the wind is against us, we kind of get used to being in the mundane. We kind of get used to being in the usual and in the typical. Jim, you remember when we visited a home one time, and there was a man who was about to go on a big adventure. He was dying of cancer. And dying is quite an adventure when you think about it. Because you're going to go to a place that you've never been before, and you're going to take a trip that you've never experienced before, and that's a pretty wild thing. And he was trying to show us what was most valuable to him in his life. And he had this big cabinet full of toy tractors. And so he's showing Jim and me his toy tractors. And I mean, he had a bunch of them. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with toy tractors. But when you look back on your life and you're thinking, what was important to me? What was valuable to me? What was just possessed me and pushed me forward in life? And what you look at is a cabinet full of toy tractors, I think you're missing it. And Jim and I walked out of that house after praying for that guy because of this adventure he was about to take and wanting him to get prepared for that adventure. And we just kind of looked at ourselves and shook our heads and went, wow. I wonder how many of us put all the value in life into things that really don't matter. Because we get just so used to the predictable. We get so used to the typical. What I want for you to understand, first of all, is that we all have a boat. We all have that context in life. But that's not where the adventure is. The adventure is not in the usual. It's not in the typical. But it happens in between the spaces of the usual and the typical. You see, the adventure isn't in the boat. If you were to ask Peter, where's the adventure? It's when you step out of it. It's when you step out of the boat. When you do that, stuff starts happening, right? I mean, this Felix guy, when he's 24 miles in the air, you can hear him talk, but he was terrified. I mean, you can't not be human and not be terrified as he's looking 24 miles below him to the earth, and he says, I'm coming home. He probably felt pretty good as long as he was in his capsule with the door shut. But when he opens the door and he stands on the rail and he looks down, there's the adventure. The adventure is when he takes that next step. And the adventure for Peter was when he stepped out of the boat. Now, I want us to understand something, that the adventure, stepping out of the boat, is not the same thing as spectating. And a lot of times we're in that mode of adventure, and that's not really the adventure. Think about it. There were 11 other guys in that boat, right? There were 12 guys in the boat going over to Capernaum, and Peter was one of those 12. And then they see Jesus walking on the water, doing something amazing. Of course, Jesus did amazing things all the time, and they had spectated. They had watched him do amazing things all the time. But it's different watching somebody else do amazing things rather than you yourself doing amazing things. It's completely different. And so here they are, 11 guys. Simon Peter goes, "Hey, Lord, ask me to come out and walk on the water with you." And all the other guys are going, "What did he just say?" And before they have a chance for all of that to just take hold in their minds, Peter is stepping out and down out of the boat on a windy, dark night with a guy out there standing on the water saying, "Come on." And the only other human being that has ever done this in the history of all mankind, it's a guy named Simon Peter, a fisherman from the northern part of Israel, who actually stood and walked on water along with Jesus. Nobody else has done it. Now, 11 guys watched him. You know, and I know when the Cardinals win, some of you go, "I won." But there's a big difference between what you're experiencing and what those guys on the field are experiencing, right? And the adventure is not in the spectating. The adventure is in the stepping. It's when we step out of the boat. Now, that's the first thing we need to understand about stepping out of the boat. It's not a spectator sport. It's something you have to do. And we're going to talk about how you do that in a second. Stepping out of the boat is an adventure, but if you step out in the wrong places, it's a nightmare. So what's the difference? How do we keep our adventures from becoming nightmares when we take these steps of faith, when we take these steps out of the boat? It happens when our stepping is connected to our faith. When we step out of the boat and our stepping is not connected to our faith, then we're really doing something that could wipe us out. We're doing something that could end in great danger for us. Now, I want to talk to the men for a second. We're in this series, Man Up, and I want to talk to the men because I think this especially applies to us. I think men by nature are wired for adventure. I think most of us not only are not afraid of risk, we actually like it. Now, when we get older and our lives have been predictable for a long time, maybe we kind of lose our nerve. But when we're younger especially, we've got a lot of nerve. I mean, think about it. I know that some of you are going, "There you go stereotyping again, Jerry." What movies do you rent? Ladies, what movies do you rent? Do you really rent like battle movies or do you rent? Why do they call them chick flicks? You know, because adventure to a lot of women is in a relationship, has something to do with the relationship. But guys, there's something else going on. It's about finding treasure. It's about saving the girl. It's about fighting the enemy. It's about saving the universe. It's about all that stuff, right? We're usually wired for adventure, and we tend not to be too afraid of risks. And God put that wiring into men intentionally. He put that wiring into men to connect it to our faith so that we wouldn't be afraid to step out of the boat, that we wouldn't be afraid to take a risk for the Lord. But if we're taking a risk for some other reason, things can get ugly really, really fast. And I think that there is this tendency inside of us, this tendency to want to move toward adventure. And when we do it, and we're not doing it in a godly way, oh my, bad things can happen. Really bad things can happen. I mean, it can be driven from other things in faith. Like, what if it's driven out of lust? What if the adventure to you is another woman? What if that other woman is on the internet? You know, what if it's just porn? What if it's more than that? What if it's a chat room? What if it moves from a chat room to a coworker? Oh, that's an adventure. I guarantee you. And if you're wired for adventure and that connects to that part of you, that part of you that's in the flesh, and you let your lust take over, where's that going to take you? It's going to take you to a really bad place. Not an adventure, but a nightmare. It's going to take you to a place that's going to be self-destructive and others destructive if it's driven from lust. What if it's driven from greed? What if our adventure is to have more than everybody else? What if our adventure is to have the biggest house? What if it's to have the most money? What if it's to have the most toys? You know, because the guy with the most toys when he dies wins, right? No, the guy with the most toys when he dies is dead. That's what happens. Okay? But we think we win. I mean, some people do, and they're driven by greed. And so they'll do all sorts of things. So many unethical things, and because all they want to do is be at the top. All they want to do is to acquire and acquire and acquire. And materialism drives us, and the use of our money drives us, and things once again get ugly real fast. I've seen people over my years of ministry so strive for things, and they'll say things like, I want to give good things to my wife. I want to give good things to my kids. Before long, the wife and kids are gone. They're on their third marriage, and they're still pursuing things. It gets ugly. It can be driven by lust. It can be driven by greed. It can be driven by pride, where we want to push everybody else down so that we're lifted up, so that we are with the right people and not the wrong people. And we start classifying, qualifying, and labeling people. That stuff happens. And when we're driven by those negative things, guys, then we're going in a bad direction. We may be stepping out of the boat, but we're stepping out of the boat in the wrong place. When we step out of the boat and we start living out our adventure, it must be connected to our faith. When Peter stepped out of the boat, his focus, his vision was connected to Jesus Christ. And as long as he was looking at Jesus Christ, he was walking on the water. That exact power that enabled Jesus to stand up above the water and defy the gravity of this natural world was imparted to Simon Peter. And it wasn't until he noticed the waves and he noticed the wind and he got his mind off of his faith in Jesus, his relationship, his vision of Jesus, and he started to look at all that other stuff, that he started to sink. And all that was left was to say, Lord, save me. So, we all have a boat. The adventure comes when we step out of it. Well, okay, so where do I step out of the boat? This is what's awesome. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. I didn't want to talk to you about that other stuff. I mean, you got to know that. But this is what I really wanted to talk to you about. Okay? Your life has a capacity for incredible adventure. Your life can be amazing. I'm not kidding you. I know that you wash your hair before you wash your body. I know that you got the same stuff on your nightstand. I know all of that, right? But there are so many opportunities in your day, and we walk right past them. We don't see them happen. Or we see them happen to other people and miss the whole thing, because we're just not prepared for adventure. You and I, male, female, we need to be prepared for adventure, because God is bringing you adventure every moment. He's bringing you adventure. And you need to capture it and pull it in and realize how incredible God is through it. Because when you connect this to your faith, He's going to show you stuff that you never imagined. You're going to participate in stuff that you never, ever would have begun to imagine. How do I do that? Because, I'm not seeing what you're seeing. Let me tell you, first thing you got to do is you got to turn on your radar. You got to turn on your spiritual radar, okay? One of the reasons that we don't see this stuff happening to us, opportunities right in front of us, is because we don't have the radar on. What does that look like? Well, first of all, it's praying. Yeah, I know all this stuff's going to happen today. I know I'm going to go to work. I know that I'm going to be around certain people. I know I'm going to probably eat a certain place. I know all those predictable things. But what is God going to bring me in the middle of that I have no idea is coming? And am I looking for it? And am I prepared for it when it comes? That's what I want you to think about, okay? So, the way we do that is starting the day with prayer. God, help me to see what you have for me today. Help me to understand. Reveal this stuff to me so that when it comes, I'll see it and I'll take it captive. When it comes, I'll just embrace it. I'll just give 110% to it when it comes. So are you praying that like that? Are you praying expecting God to do something amazing? Listen, I'll tell you the truth. If you pray that prayer, your radar is up. You're looking around. Oh, you know all this other stuff, because you just do that. How many of you have done this? How many of you have been driving someplace, and you usually drive the same place all the time? This is like, and like you're supposed to be going someplace else, but the autopilot's on, and you find that you're driving in the same place that you always drove. And then you're like, why am I doing this? Because I was supposed to turn there. Just because you're always doing that, right? See, that's what happens. We kind of get on autopilot and we don't see this stuff. So you got to pray and you got to say, God, help me to see this today. And you're looking. So I'm looking. What is it? What's going to happen today? Who's God going to put in my path today? What situation's going to be in front of me today? So number one, you got to put out the radar. And prayer is one of the ways we do that. Here's the second way. We need to read the Bible. Okay? Because when you read the Bible, you have a daily Bible reading. What will happen is there'll be a story or something that'll come up there in the Bible that you'll read, and then all of a sudden, you'll see it play out right in front of you. How many of you have ever had that happen to you? It's weird, isn't it? It's like, oh man, I was just reading that. There it is. You know how many things we miss because we just didn't prepare for it? We miss it because we didn't expect it. We didn't put up the radar. And when we don't do that, we miss so many neat things. Second thing. So the first one is put up the radar. That's Bible reading and that's praying. And I know that sounds like, oh yeah, read the Bible, pray. But no, I'm telling you, it's awesome. It's awesome what God will put in front of you that day if you're ready to find it, if you're ready to see it. Second thing is check your motives. Check your motives. And that would be part of my prayer life, but it would happen all through the day. And even when that opportunity comes my way, say it's a coworker, and your coworker's got a question, and they come up to you and they say, and they start in on this question. Now you are connecting adventure to faith, and you're going, God, if there's an adventure here, if there's something that you've got in front of me, something that you saw before I ever saw it, help me to see it right now. And if the door opens, you walk through it. And you take that step of faith. You step out of the boat. Oh, I know that there's that usual and predictable, hi, how you doing? Fine. How are you doing? Fine. Okay, see you later. What if you said, no, really? You're looking at that person, and today you look at them and you think, there's something about them that seems distant or distracted, maybe even sad. See, the radar's up. And you go, hey, you don't look like you usually look. You look a little sad. Are you doing okay? Are you doing all right? Because, I'm concerned about you. Man, are you in for an adventure? Because that person may just go, well, here you go. And then you're in it. You're out of the boat. Now, is that scary to be out of the boat? Oh, yeah. Do you have all the answers? No. What are you doing? You're walking on the water. You're walking on the water. Check your motives, though. Why am I doing that? Where's my heart at? What's my desire for this person? And you got to keep those motives checked through this whole process. So turn on the radar, check your motives, and the third thing is stay focused on Jesus. The adventure is always going to be great if you stay focused on Jesus. You don't sink until you take your eyes off of him. And when you take your eyes off him, down you go. Last week, 19 people, and you'll see it in a little bit on our baptism video. Last week, 19 people were baptized at the crossing. And that's amazing. We can celebrate it. It's incredible. All right, 19 people. I wonder how many of those 19 people a month ago, a week ago, a day ago said, you know what I'm going to do? I tell you what I want to do. I want to go up and get wet in front of a whole bunch of strangers. I'm working on this hair so that it'll just stick to my head. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have all of my makeup run in front of everybody. I'm going to wear that dumb t-shirt. That's what I want to do. I'm going to make a wet fashion statement. You know what they did? They stepped out of the boat. All of a sudden, I'm not going to watch somebody else on the screen. I'm not going to be the person that applauds when the other person has the adventure. I'm going to have the adventure. You getting this? And then everything changes. You know, they didn't see it coming. They didn't see it coming. But when it happened, it was awesome. And you know what? You may not see it coming, but when it comes, it's awesome. And what I want you to do is get your mind and your heart and your eyes and your thought life right so that you can be a part of the great adventure. We're moving to a time of decision.